once again to discuss things.
One,
Yeah.
I'm good. Alright. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2. Joining me today is Rasco. Rasco's Modern Life. Oh, well, you just come in and introduce yourself then, sir.
Yeah.
That's cool. Resco, we are continuing our fan film reviews today, but we are also continuing Geeky Gentleman Horror Month. What are we reviewing today, then?
We are reviewing The Shining fan film inspired by Stanley Kubrick.
Okay, let me just say, before we start on this, when you told me that we were reviewing a Shining fan film, that wasn't a tribute to, like, Stephen King or that, but was inspired by Stanley Kubrick. That has to be, on some level, the most ambitious kind of project we've talked about. And, like, not on, like, the same scale as some of the other stuff. Like, this isn't as big a scale as, like, the Game of Thrones fan film we talked about a couple weeks ago. But trying to do a fan film specifically inspired by Stanley Kubrick is just a really, really ballsy move to me.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's like calling out Mike Tyson in his prime.
Right? Like, that is just for a fan film, which are, usually low budget kind of piece together things, to try to do something that's, like, inspired by and tribute of Stanley Kubrick is like, man, that is a tall tree to climb. So that aside, what did you think of this, Rasco?
I like this video.
Yeah?
Yes. It's a good video.
Thank you for the silly voice. I can always depend on you for silly voices.
Review concluded. No, I liked this. I thought this was kind of cool. This is one of those that I think was probably done for some sort of like class project for some sort of like film class or something. I'm not sure. I haven't really looked into it at all. But I think that this is really well made, and I think that even though, like, obviously you can't do The Shining justice on YouTube in 12 minutes, but at the same time, it's not really trying to do The Shining. It's more so kind of taking The Shining, and it's taking a lot of little specific characteristics about that movie, and it's kind of trying to translate it to another setting, and just kind of it's difficult because I don't really know exactly the purpose besides growing as a filmmaker by making this. And that's not to say that, like, it has no purpose, it's dumb, but I think that, like, overall, like, you wouldn't decide to make this unless you were just really interested in trying to maybe use some techniques that were in The Shining, or just maybe some, like, aesthetic kind of trappings.
Yeah, but, and that's like one thing where I was really kind of scratching my head on it. Because it calls itself a fan film, it calls itself a tribute to Stanley Kubrick. It's not trying to hide that about itself.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, I'm trying to think about this in a similar context to how we talk about other fan films. And, like, I don't know, to me it would be weird to do this literally with any other property we've talked about. Like, I don't know, we've never talked about a Blade Runner fan film, but, like, it'd be weird if there was someone that made a Blade Runner fan film and they really just told the exact same story of Blade Runner, but just kind of changed the location.
Mm-hmm.
And, directly lifted scenes from Blade Runner, but just changed who the characters are.
Yeah.
That would be strange. And I'm not sure if I should call that a problem here, because it's very aware of what it's doing. But, like, if you were looking for a Shining fan film, let me ask you this. Did this meet with what on any level you were expecting it to be?
Actually, yeah, it did.
Okay.
It was kind of what I was thinking you would have to do if you, like, just when I saw the thumbnail first. I didn't actually click on the video or anything. I saw the thumbnail, and I saw the name Harry Walters. And oftentimes when people upload to channels that have their first and last name, it's because it's kind of like their portfolio for where they just keep all of their, short films that they've worked on. And I just saw that name, and I was like, oh, this is probably a short film where he's like saw The Shining and wanted to kind of try to like emulate a few things just to see what it was like to actually be behind the camera to accomplish certain types of scenes and certain types of shots and things like that. And I don't know how I got onto this. There's something you asked a second ago.
No, like, did this meet with what at all you were expecting?
Oh yeah. And like I said, yeah, it was kind of what I was. I thought that roughly this would be what it is. I didn't think that it would be so far removed from like being in a hotel that's like closed down for the winter. I didn't think that it would go as far as being like about this kid doing a class project at a school or something like that. But
that was my thing. When I saw Shining fan film, I was like, okay, I was expecting them to be another family left at the Overlook Hotel. Or someone left at the Overlook Hotel was what I was expecting. And like for, pictures of Jack Nicholson to be in the group parties in the background or something like that. That's what I was expecting. I was expecting the Overlook Hotel, but in 2015 or 2017 or whatever. What we get is, okay, we have characters snowed in this, kind of this very open but limiting and restrictive environment because of just how vast it is alone. And we have a guy who's obsessed with something, and that's kind of driving him crazy.
Yeah.
And we have a lady who is just trying to make the best of the situation. All of that was like, okay, that's interesting, and I like that. But I'm just trying to think if there's like I literally cannot think of what I would feel like if any other fan film did a thing like this. And that's the weird part. Like, this feels less like a fan film and more like a remake in a weird way. And that's just kind of making me scratch my head a little bit.
Yeah, it's weird because I think where you can see kind of like where the seed of the idea for this came from is a lot of kind of wanting to put certain things into practice is what I get from this. Like, for example, I think that what's kind of interesting about how they changed the story is that, one, obviously they have to change things just because of like what they have at their disposal. If they have a school, it makes sense to shoot at a school. But at the same time, what's cool about that is that it requires on some level an understanding of the kind of story that The Shining is in order to translate it. There's a few really important elements that make The Shining The Shining. One is the isolation aspect. Two is the location.
Yeah, because the hotel is meant for like a number of people, like a large group of people, and being like 3 people in there alone is weird and creepy. And so a school, a university is meant for a large group of people, a large number of people, and being in there alone is weird and creepy.
Yeah. Yeah. And the third thing that it gets is like the kind of obsession that makes you spiral into madness kind of story. And it's those 3 things that are kind of what make The Shining in a very vague sense. And what's cool about this, and I think what works about it being pretty much like a remake and only very loosely about The Shining, it's more so just it's kind of like the aesthetics of The Shining with this other story. But what's cool is that they kept those 3 things in check, so it doesn't feel like it feels like it was something like it feels interesting to see them take The Shining and put it in this location with these characters and this and this story, because they didn't like lose the 3 elements of The Shining that kind of lend to the horror aspect of it. They didn't lose that stuff. That's all there, and that's what's cool about it. Is it requires an understanding of The Shining as a movie in order to be what it is.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It definitely. It by no means doesn't get the point of The Shining. Like, I see people do stuff like, oh, we should have this thing, like, reference The Shining and because it's an iconic horror film. The Shining is an iconic horror film. It is not an iconic horror film in the same way that like Halloween or Friday the 13th is.
Yeah.
It is much more an art house picture for horror movies than anything else, and its horror is not about the boo scariness or the oh my god this is creepy. It is about the unsettling ticking time bomb nature of it all. And so that all makes it really interesting. And then you look at this, and it definitely has some stuff going for it. It definitely gets a creepy vibe. I thought it was pretty clever to use video editing in place of a typewriter for that very particular reveal of what the hell he's been working on.
Yeah.
The perfect edit. Kill her, kill her, kill her, kill her. I will say, on a computer that is nowhere near as scary as it is with a typewriter... Because, like, okay, have you ever heard the story about, like, the process of creating the screenplay in The Shining?
No.
Or the novel in The Shining, I should say?
Oh, no.
Okay. It was literally typed out on a typewriter. Stanley Kubrick's assistants had to sit there on a typewriter and type 400-some-odd pages of all work and no play makes Jack a dull, dull boy. All work and no play makes Jack a dull, dull boy. And then they had to do it again for every single language the film was released in. And they shot it over and over and over again for each of those things. Doing that on a computer, doing the, like, repetition thing, don't get me wrong, it's still creepy that it's all, you know, put up there and it's got, like, an animation to it. But literally, I mean, it takes some of the obsessive creepiness away from it, because there's no shortcut to sitting there and typing out a sentence on a typewriter. You have to type out the full sentence every time. When it comes to a video or anything on a computer, type it out once, Control-C, Control-V, 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 Control-V. And so it's certainly got, on the initial impact of seeing it, that same shock and scariness to it. But the thing that made that the creepiest to me is just how unsettling and disturbing it was that Jack Nicholson's character sat there and typed that out a billion times. And by comparison, this, like, it's got that, oh shit, he's, like, obsessing over killing her. But it doesn't have that same, like, underlying creepiness of, did he sit there and write that out a billion times before she saw it? And I'm like, well, even if he did, I think that there's another way. Like, I know for a fact that these guys had Control-V. I'm going to say that just as, you know, there's my thing that I didn't ask anybody about, but I'm assuming, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I'm going to unequivocally state they did not type out kill her over and over again. They specifically copy and pasted that and then added effects and animation to it. So it's that it loses the obsessive nature a tad bit is one thing that jumped to mind for me.
Yeah, that's fair. It would have been awesome if they were at a school that conveniently had a bunch of typewriters.
Mm-hmm. That would have been
typewriter
cool.
class.
Yeah, there we go. Go ahead.
One thing I wanted to talk about is the acting, because I thought the acting was pretty good.
Yeah. It's not like the greatest acting we've had in a fan film or anything, but it's not that just level of passable either. Like, I believe everything that's going on. Like, I'm engrossed in these characters.
Yeah, I thought that it just felt really natural to me. Like, it didn't feel like I was watching people acting, and it's definitely above just passable. I mean, like, I actually think that these people probably are actually actors. Like, they probably do pride themselves on their acting ability, and I would expect that if you put them in something else, they would be, you know, equally great in that as well. I don't know. I just thought that the acting was really solid in this, and I don't know. I just don't really have any complaints in regards to it. That's what was cool about it for me.
I agree. I thought the acting was pretty good. Now, this is one of those things where I'm not sure about. The guy that, like, cleans him up in the restroom.
Mm-hmm.
No, wait, never mind. I completely withdraw that. I feel stupid for a sec. Sorry. Ignore me.
I will.
Yeah. How do you feel about the way it ended with the cut as opposed to, like, having a confrontation or seeing him try to murder her?
I think that it works like on YouTube, I think, and in a way that it would be cool to see them like do like a whole Shining chase scene with an axe or something like that. At the same time, like something about this being a YouTube video makes that kind of work for me. I don't know what it is. I don't really have a reason or a principled argument. It's just like I didn't really mind it that much.
That's fair. I don't know. Just like when he walked into the room, I was really hoping for a confrontation scene. Like not even necessarily seeing him try to kill her in that moment, but like, you know, similar to Jack and what's her name going up the stairs. Like that's just kind of what occurred to me. I'm like, oh, are they going to do this? And it turned out no. It just ended there. I was like, I'm not let down by that, but I was. That's not what I was expecting either.
I wasn't expecting it either.
Okay, but since you're talking about this, you think that this was done primarily just to demonstrate a, or to learn directing techniques or attempt to use directing techniques that Kubrick did, or in tribute to them, whatever. How'd you feel about the way it was shot and directed?
I liked it a lot. I think that what's kind of cool about this is that it kind of looks like the aspect ratio of The Shining. Like if you were to watch The Shining in like a 35 millimeter kind of normal, pretty standard aspect ratio, you'd really lose a lot of the movie because of the sets are so big, and the way Stanley Kubrick shoots a lot of things, he'll like to put a camera right center in a hallway and like let you see all the way down all of the lines of the hallway to the vanishing point. And he likes to do that a lot, and I think that oftentimes you'll go on YouTube and people want to make their stuff look more filmy. They'll just put they'll put the black bars on there, they'll put a letterbox or whatever, and it's like people just do that because they see movies like that, and sometimes it's like this to me feels a million times more cinematic because I feel like it's really well composed and it understands why that aspect ratio was so important to The Shining. I don't know, this to me feels a lot more cinematic than some fan films we've seen that have the black bars and try really hard to be cinematic. This felt, like I said, it felt like somebody that actually knows, like when you go into a scene, the amount of coverage that's required. And for a Kubrick movie too, because Stanley Kubrick, he'll shoot a lot of scenes with very little coverage. It'll be a guy walking down a hallway, and then he'll go into a room and you'll have a conversation where it's just two angles. And in movies today, you don't see that. You'll see a detail shot for almost every single thing you cut to. In fact, there was only one thing that I didn't think was a very Shining-esque kind of shot, and it was where you just kind of see him bouncing the ball on the floor.
Oh, you mean her?
Oh, yeah, it was her in that case. For some reason, I thought it was him. Oh, it's because Jack throws the ball in the movie. But when she goes to pick up the ball and bounces it, there's just like one shot of the ball itself bouncing, which isn't a shot you would see in a Kubrick movie. You just wouldn't focus on a detail that minute most of the time. And
I don't know if I feel that way or not.
No, very rarely will Kubrick do anything that is not a complete composed shot with a foreground, middle ground, and background. Very rarely is there ever a single item in frame that is very rarely. But that being said, not a big deal because I think the rest of this is very Kubrick-esque, especially the opening shot where it's just kind of following him down the hallway.
Yeah, but it's not smooth like Kubrick would do it, right?
It's not a Steadicam, and that's something you just kind of have to suck up and deal with.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, you know, how can you tell Stanley Kubrick didn't actually fake the moon landing?
Steadicam? I don't know.
There was no tracking shot, man.
Oh.
No, but like it is one of those things where, like, if you're gonna do Kubrick, and again, this is why I feel like this was so ambitious, not because it's The Shining or anything. It's because it's trying to do Kubrick, and if you're gonna do Kubrick, I gotta talk about it like Kubrick wouldn't do that. He just wouldn't. I'm sorry, that would not be the thing Kubrick would do. And so if you're doing it in tribute to Kubrick, I gotta think about it on a similar level, and that's a big fucking bill for a fan film on YouTube. I'm not saying that a fan film on YouTube couldn't be just as visually dynamic and fascinating as a Kubrick film, or a Kubrick scene. Let me put it that way. But that's a big freaking bill. That's a big check that you gotta have to cash. And this movie does some really cool direction, really interesting visuals and stuff, and is clearly in reverence of Kubrick. But I still feel like putting yourself up to that standard, as a reviewer, I have a really hard time talking about this then, without going to, yeah, I mean, that's a good shot for a fan film. That's a terrible shot for something trying to be like Kubrick.
Yeah, that's fair, but I don't know, like,
that's maybe a little harsh, but that's kind of where my head is when I'm talking about the visuals of this, which I do feel like this was primarily made as a visuals piece. This is meant to be a visual story.
Mm-hmm. It's I think that what I at least admire about it is, like, even if you don't have a Steadicam, that shot is supposed to be there because that's the kind of shot that Kubrick... Before the Steadicam is around, like in Clockwork Orange, for example, Kubrick does the same kind of shots that he'll do in movies like The Shining, but he does them without a Steadicam. He does them shoulder-mounted camera. Like the scene in Clockwork Orange where they're marching him in to the rehabilitation facility. Mm-hmm. They just have a guy holding a camera there, and it's pretty much what they have to do for this fan film, because I don't think the Steadicam existed. The Steadicam came into existence with the first Rocky movie, and so, like,
no, I get what you're saying. My thing is, Kubrick was always aiming for that, though. He was always trying to get the tracking shots to be much more smoother, because he wanted to take your head out of the fact that you were watching a movie and just feel like you were, hallucinating or something behind somebody as they did a thing. So when I'm watching this, I'm like, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I don't know, man. I need somebody like on a skateboard or a wheelie chair or something.
We need Tony Hawk.
Yeah, I need it to be more fluid when I'm thinking Kubrick, and this wants me to think Kubrick. Like I thought it was really weird that in the opening sequence, when you get to the titles, it says The Shining a film by Stanley Kubrick. I'm like, what?
Yeah, that's kind of weird.
And so when you put yourself up against Kubrick, I love Kubrick, and visually this is definitely a love letter to Kubrick, but I guarantee you that they went, okay, that at some point in this they probably went, okay, that takes good enough, and that's not a Kubrick attitude. I guarantee you, like, when he passes him for that opening shot, I'm not going to say they only shot it once or something. I can tell they didn't. I saw a blooper reel for this. They shot scenes a number of times. But, like, that opening shot, as he moves past the camera and it gets maybe a little too close to him, I'm sitting there, I'm like, feel like they could have done that better. I feel like that is not as smooth as it could have been. And so
Ian's a hater.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm left with him. Like, the reason I think this is ambitious is because it is trying to be in reverence to Stanley Kubrick, and that's a big-ass check to cash in my book. It's certainly an admirable-ass effort. It's better than anything I could do, I'll give it that. But, like, I wouldn't try to do anything like Kubrick.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know. No, I mean, like, you're right about it, but none of that's too much of an issue for me, honestly.
Okay. I know you've been in a Kubrick mood lately, so I was curious what you thought of all that.
Oh yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. From a like, everyone knows, like, that Kubrick's notorious for doing like a million takes until you get it exactly right, and that's very true. Like, that may be kind of like the anti spirit of Kubrick, but I think that at least they were aware that that's the kind of shot, like at least anytime they maybe fail to reach up to exactly what Kubrick did, they understood what he did. And I think that's like a big hurdle that a lot of people have to, like, a lot of people fail to get over, is like tribute stuff. Oftentimes it feels like they didn't really stop and think about specific things that they need to make sure if they get everything else wrong, they at least get these things right. And I think that this does that. Like, this makes sure that there's a few core things that got to be perfect, or at least as close to perfect as whatever. But outside of that, you know, there's room for error. And at least for me, you're right. Maybe it's not accomplished the exact way you could have accomplished it, you know, with the studio. When you're actually making something, you know, when you're actually making a big budget film. But at least they understood that there were certain things they needed to try and do. And that's what I really like about it.
I can understand that. And I don't know, it's one of those things where these thoughts didn't come to my mind as I was watching it. They're only here as I'm talking about it. And I'm trying to wrap my head about why I reacted to things the way I did. This was a really interesting piece, if nothing else. And I thought it was, again, incredibly ambitious, and it pays off on a number of those things. I think that a lot of people watching this that, you know, are aware of Kubrick will go, oh my god, I see what you're doing here, I see what you're doing here. And that's probably what they wanted to do. So, I'm reasonably impressed by most of this. But, again, I feel like the standard that it's putting itself up to from a review standpoint is very, very ambitious. What else can we talk about?
I'll talk about the setting really quick. The school. What was cool about it? It kind of looked like the Overlook. Like, there was a very, like, Overlook-esque kind of vibe to it. Like, it's obviously not the Overlook, because the Overlook, well, like, for those are sets in the movie, they're sets. But what was cool about it is that what I really like about the sets of The Shining is that they are literally the least scary sets you could possibly design. Like, they are not even remotely trying to make any of the sets scary. And a school is a very non-scary place for the most part. And so it really worked in that way, because it, like, they're just some of the colors, like, you know, there's very, like, bright blues randomly on the doors in the building, and, like, in The Shining there will randomly be these, like, big red columns in the lobby and stuff like that, and just, like, weird colors like that that are in no way scary, but somehow around that you have to try to make it scary somehow. I just thought it was cool that, like, this school, to me, it felt like the kind of set, like, if this school was a set, this is probably what Kubrick would have wanted it to look like. And this is, like, they don't really have any control over this at all. They're just kind of, like, at a school, but I think that's cool.
I mean,
like,
they chose which rooms to shoot near and stuff like that, so I think that's even if it wasn't an intentional choice, I thought that was a good choice regardless. I like the idea of the shot of the lecture hall, and for all I know, that might be the biggest lecture hall at their school that they were shooting this at. I think the lecture hall that they're shooting the scene where he's talking to himself is too intimate a space for what I believe that was trying to be in reference to and trying to mirror. 'Cause, like, that lecture hall scene reminded me of Jack being in the bar by himself, the ballroom. And that's just a really, really big, empty room, right? And the lecture halls are big, but, like, I don't know, something about it, maybe it was the lighting, because it was kind of just dark, dimly lit. Something about that space felt too intimate to me.
No, that's fair. Yeah, no, that's fair.
Yeah, because, like, if it were me doing this and I was, like, shooting it at where I went to college, I know exactly which lecture halls I would go to shoot that particular scene, and they're, you know, just bigger. Like, I felt like I know the size of the room that they were in, and it's not the as big as I feel that scene deserves. Anything else to talk about with this one?
One thing I did like that they kind of kept was the little like headings for all the like Friday, 9 p.m. for like it had like all the little like cut to black with the white text on the screen.
This dude loses his mind very quickly. Like I get it, it's a couple hours he's stressed, but like it's a couple hours, bro, and you're gonna kill somebody. It's fucked up.
Who knows? It could happen to any of us.
Yeah.
We could all do it.
Yeah, I thought that was no. I did like the use of the clock, the ticking clock, like that. That was kind of cool. I got nothing else on this one, man. I am at my wit's end on this one.
Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say.
All right, let's go ahead and go on to ratings. Rasco, what would you rate this fan film?
I'm gonna give this, because I think that it is really ambitious, and but it actually I think really executes. And it's very competently made, and in some ways it's above and beyond. And like I appreciated how they really seemed to make sure that they kind of fully developed the idea behind like the purpose of this before they just went out and made it. Like they wanted to very specifically accomplish some certain things. They wanted to use some techniques, kind of emulate some certain things. And I think they did that for the most part. So I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5 bouncing balls.
Okay. I'm gonna go with a 3 out of 5. Bottles of water. I guess I don't know. There's not a lot to pull from for this one. Yeah, I'm gonna go with 3 out of 5 because again, I feel like it's very ambitious and it's really well done. But that was just a very bold choice, and I don't know, like it puts me in a headspace where I've got to be more critical on it. So it's harder to be easier on that one. Okay, next week we'll be reviewing a fan film I'm reasonably excited about. It wouldn't be your typical idea for a horror fan film, but you're gonna have a hard time convincing me it doesn't count. So we'll be talking about Sandman, 24-Hour Diner, a Sandman fan film. Very excited for that. All right, everyone, thanks very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I'm the beta male cuck.
And we are your geeky gentlemen. And we will be discussing things.
Ha 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 ha!